training or survey.
Right. The survey.
Yeah, the survey, that's actually one of our recommendations tonight that we'll be making, and have been working through that with Assistant Chief Dowd and the subcommittee.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Hawkins. Jenny Goff is on the line. Oh, let me. Jenny, did you have any comments?
I do not have any comments.
Thanks for being with us. And Jennifer Truskowski-Smith. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I apologize, Jennifer. Any comments?
You did pronounce that correctly, and I do not. Thank you.
Oh, very well. And Dante, we don't have any callers at the moment, but if folks do want to call in during the course of the meeting, it's 800-934-9182, 800-934-9182.
Thank you. All right, now moving to policies and practices and their discussions and recommendations coming to the full commission.
All right, thank you, Don. I'll turn the time over to Steve Angerweirden. Just kidding, Steve.
We don't have time for me to do that, and I still need 15 minutes to push back on Commissioner Prospero that I talk a lot. I need 15 minutes to explain that I don't talk a lot. So we have time for that.
We'll make time. We'll find time for you.
I appreciate it. I'll be happy to support you, Josh. These are good recommendations. Start us off.
All right, great. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, but you're also sharing your view of all the commissioners.
Which one are you seeing?
The commissioners are in the middle of your screen.
You can currently see your desktop.
How about now?
There you go.
All right, I thought it was flipped, but all right, good. All right, so a few recommendations that have been developing over the last couple months. In our last meeting last week, we had a lot of good discussion. An hour and a half was a half hour over, and I apologize, Dante, but we're trying to solidify something. And so from that meeting, Luke Cimarron, Chaffin, and I formulated what was discussed and put it into some drafts. And so we want to present something here and get input, and feedback, and response to. One or more may be ready to go and move forward, or we may need to reassess in subcommittee next week, which is fine. The first is related to the police officer body worn camera policy and procedure. We've had, again, Chief and the PD, Mr. Cottrell, Sergeant Givens, meet with the subcommittee multiple times. We reviewed the recent ordinance and made some conclusions here for your consideration. I'll just read it and follow along, and then we'll open it up for additional comment from the subcommittee and then others. So Utah code sets minimum standards for activation. Oh, and I'll also mention that we reviewed the matrix report and recommendations as well, and might reference those here in some part. So Utah code sets minimum standards for activation, storage, notifications, and other body-worn camera procedures. Body-worn camera use in Salt Lake City Police Department is outlined in policy 422, which is largely dictated by Utah Code 77-7A, law enforcement use of body-worn cameras, and adopted in 2016. Additionally, the City Council adopted Ordinance 54 on December 1, 2020 for the police department's use of body-worn cameras that formalize as recent policies and executive orders guiding body-worn camera use and footage release. The Racial Equity and Policing Commission believes the current policy and ordinance is part of a multifaceted approach the city is taking to examine internal systems and identify paths towards better accountability and equity. SLCPD's policy and ordinance match and exceed state law requirements with their use. Additionally, the commission found that the SLCPD is progressive in the use of their cameras by incorporating additional accountability and transparency beyond what state law requires. Examples include internal auditing and outside auditing, 2 levels of reports, and random audits of footage. The commission supports the current body-worn camera policies and ordinance and recommends SLCPD continue to strive to be the gold standard of best practices nationwide. Additional recommendations to achieve gold standard include Ordinance 54 requires a qualified individual outside of the SLCPD designated by the mayor to randomly review and audit body-worn camera videos. The commission recommends that this position be identified and provided the necessary support and funding to perform these responsibilities. Specify, develop, and establish how body-worn camera reviews and audits are to be conducted and define uniform and consistent performance metrics and language. This should be done collaboratively with the current audit and inspection unit within SLCPD, led by Sergeant Mason Givens, and the qualified outside body-worn camera auditor. Strongly consider including audit all use of force reviews to determine if the reviews were conducted appropriately and if the outcomes are within policy. This includes K-9 incidents involving use of force. Increasing the random review of video by the outside qualified individual from 5 to 20 per month, and include random sampling of officer videos as well as completed supervisor reviews. Publish the results of body-worn camera audits and review audits annually. And finally, SLCPD is currently nationally accredited by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. This requires compliance with 162 standards, and only 4% of law enforcement agencies nationwide are accredited. Salt Lake City PD should strive for an advanced accreditation, 462 standards, and explore the cost, resources, and benefits of doing so. All right, questions, comments, additions, first from subcommittee or law enforcement? All right, questions, comments from anybody else?
Reverend Davis, and I have just a question that may be showing my ignorance, but in terms of activation of body cameras, is there something that says at what point an officer should activate that camera?
Yeah, Chief Brown, I'll defer to you on responding to that. Thank you, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Reverend Davis, there is both in state law and in policy. Anytime an officer is engaging with somebody in the public, it lists several different definitions of when that camera should be on, but that is definitely spelled out in state law and our policy. So,
and to add to that, I believe the Matrix report assessed the SLCPD compliance with that, and it ranked very high nationally, if I'm not mistaken. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Maybe just another comment that this also coincides with Matrix's recommendations that 5 random audits per month is not enough.
Yep.
And that there was one more that I forget what it was now, but this is in line with what also Matrix was recommending.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Don. 5 to 20, and then this was all, I mean, it's in the ordinance, but emphasized by Matrix, also by us, and that to establish uniformity collaboratively, they develop this. And then again, this last bullet goes to the main desire of the subcommittee and members of the commission has been to achieve more transparency, accountability, and to aspirationally be the gold standard or a model for the rest of the company. I also found that shared by SSOED, and hopeful that this might be a step to get there.
And maybe just another comment as it relates to what city staff have asked, that there might be a budget implication to this if there's an outside evaluator of the cameras and or other things. There might be a budget implication to this that might be well included within some type of recommendation.
Yeah, was that directed at me, Don?
Just generally
Yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah, I believe there are certainly budget implications because there'll be this outside the PD auditor that'll need to be housed somewhere, mayor's office or somewhere, which will include costs.
On that, I believe this is already required, so it would be growing that for the additional time. So it would, quadruple the number, because once it's established, we could make sure that they have the opportunity to look at those other audits. I strongly recommend increasing that, or support the recommendation, increase that to 20. The part of our responsibility here is to establish or grow community trust. I felt a little low for me to be able to do that, be looking at other areas, so we can increase that. I also really like the idea of publishing the results both within the department and outside the department, because these training videos, the uses of force and the audits will be such a ripe opportunity to have additional training opportunities. In other words, is there a pattern that we need to address? We can do through training to see if something develops. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that section about that random sampling. Also sends a message that we're going to be looking, even if it hasn't come to our attention. Still an opportunity that it could come up, and I think that will help build community trust.
Thank you,
Commissioner Andrew Warden. Just real quick, I think when I was talking with Matrix, you could look at one video of an officer who may be assigned on a call that maybe all they did is hold traffic and there's no interaction with the public. I think Matrix was saying not so much a video, but let's look at an incident that involves all the officers who are on scene at that time. So I think that's the direction they're going to get a bigger view of the entire situation.
Can I just add something? I just want to say that the information that Sergeant Givens provided to us regarding the logistics of the body camera was extremely useful and relevant to come up with these recommendations. And I got a lot out of it. So I just wanted to just say that information was very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonald, and attest to a lot of difficult questions were asked, and he and Chief Brown were grilled, and they brought information and shared data and responded to all the questions. All right.
Joshua?
Yes.
As a pragmatist, what does that data storage look like? Is there limits to that? I just can't imagine how much data it takes up to have all those videos stored for who knows how long.
Yeah,
I think I saw somewhere where there's an unlimited storage, but Man, I just find that hard to believe. Did anybody talk about that?
Yeah, great
Commissioner-
question. Commissioner Powell asked about that a few times. Go ahead, Chief.
I was just going to say, Commissioner Prosperos, yeah, that the data storage is a big cost to agencies, but we have funded our body-worn camera program to have unlimited data storage. So we can store as much as we want and keep it as long as we want according to law.
That's amazing. Wow.
Thank you, Commissioner Prospero. You're on mute, Dante. Yes, I got to tell Dante he's on mute.
Thanks. I'll put $1 in the jar. So can I ask, what is the overall recommendation and ask for this particular one?
I guess it's two. One, to know the thorough assessment by the subcommittee of the policies and practices around body-worn cameras and to make a statement on that, and then to make a recommendation related to these three sub.
Okay. Okay. So I know there's the committee has several of these, so why don't we just do these one at a time in case there's some questions about any particular one. So I would ask the commission if there's any more discussion needed, is there a consensus that this recommendation should be moved forward to the mayor and city council? So is there a need for more conversation or discussion? If so, jump into it. You're on mute, Reverend.
I'm okay with moving it forward.
Okay, thank you.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do this officially like we just started earlier today. So it's been moved and seconded that this recommendation be accepted and move forward to the mayor and to city council. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thumbs up.
Aye.
Okay, aye. All opposed? Okay, so recommendation number 1 is accepted. Thank you, Josh. Go for it.
All right, I'm going to come back to this. I want to do this. I know Commissioner Shiflett had a lot of input on this and was valuable in the discussion, and she needs to jump off the call and get on a plane soon. So this has been discussed in full commission.
Getting on a plane.
Oh, where are you going?
I have another board meeting.
Oh, board. See, board. I was thinking boarding. All right. She's going to a board meeting. Thank you. Commissioner Prospeto also sent me some information, had some good questions related to this, and so wanted to present this, then open it up for discussion. And so there has been discussion going back months on, and we heard it from the public comment a minute ago regarding implicit bias survey, and then working with Chief Brown and Assistant Police Chief Doubt, we created this recommendation. Leverage the planned cultural assessment mentioned in the police department's crime control plan to incorporate an implicit bias survey. Selected key commissioners shall collaborate with Assistant Chief of Police Tim Doubt to finalize the survey and administer it by December 31, 2021. The survey shall be modeled after the Pew Research Center 2016 National Survey of Law Enforcement Officers. The results shall be shared with the commission to inform next steps.
Just a question / comment, given that we're talking about this survey not being, the results not coming in until 2022, and we don't know the formation or formulation of the commission in 2022, you might add somebody else that the results are shared with, be it chief equity officer, be it mayor, somebody that's not just the commission that might be able to do some work with it.
And make sure that the results, at least the people on the commission can see what the results are, that we have access to it.
Excellent, great. And let me ask Chief Brown if I'd want their input, because it sounded like from Assistant Chief Doubt, this could be expedited by incorporating it into the crime control plan. But I wasn't certain on the date with if it's feasible to do it in a month or 6 months, or what is feasible in terms of a timeline.
Josh, I think we put a placeholder in our crime control plan for this very survey. I think as soon as we can develop the survey, I think we could expedite it within the department and probably have results back in maybe 30 to 45 days. And then the analysis of that, however, the analysis of that would take, I think we could probably get this done by, I'm just guessing here, maybe 2 or 3 months. Anybody have input that have done these surveys before? Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, or I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think if we could develop the survey, we could get it done.
That another key consideration, developing of the survey, as Commissioner Prospero mentioned in an email to me. The template or sample is pretty extensive, and the intent is not to duplicate that, but to identify with the police department the key questions that we want to ask, which I don't think will be too time consuming, but that is consideration. Go ahead.
I mean, it seems that if you are modeling an existing survey and personalizing it for Salt Lake City, and have a dedicated staff of a few people, it would appear to me that it could be feasible within a quarter at the very least.
Great.
Because you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel if you have a template already.
All right.
We conduct these type of studies very commonly within political science, and they're not really all that hard to set up. You know, college students set surveys up, and if we could even do it electronically, to where an officer can do this in their own home, and not around other officers, I think that would be a conducive atmosphere as well. So we can definitely, I think, cooperate with the city and getting this done in a timely manner and efficiently as well if we have a dedicated staff to it.
So Josh, that was my question, is who's going to administer, develop the survey, and it seems like you guys are thinking of a group, who's going to administer it, who's going to clean the data, and who's going to analyze it, and who's going to write the report? Is all that falling on PD?
Yeah, that's a great question. It would be it'd be identified key commissioners to do it jointly with the police department, and so with full transparency.
Well, you to clean the data, you need someone who knows, a statistician, basically, someone who knows how to scrub data, and that's a skill set that the average person doesn't have. So you want to make sure you have, you want to make sure you have good, clean data set, and make sure that that a good sampling as well. So it's going to require some skills and some work, but it's not, this happen. People do this a lot, and the city does this a lot as well within what they do already as part of their everyday business. Surveys go out all the time. I get them. So there are people that can do this. Whether or not they can allocate the resources for this would be the question, because that would probably be a budget item as well, because you may have to take them away from doing something else to dedicate to this. So it might be a follow-up conversation regarding how this will come about.
Yeah, so as Chief Brown, you said you put a placeholder in the control plan for this. Do you have a response to those questions?
Well, I'm listening to Commissioner Prosperos and Commissioner McDonald. I think they're both right. I think this needs to be done, and it probably should be done by somebody that a professional company or organization that actually does this. And then we can administer the survey electronically to every officer to take that. But then the information should probably be cleaned and put into a report. So this kind of goes back to the conversation that we had the other day, Commissioner Prosperos, where we were talking about having a professional company do it, maybe through HR within the city to get a great product, because that's what we want.
And if I could suggest a couple of things. One, I don't know that it's an implicit bias survey versus a culture and climate survey, so maybe I'm misunderstanding what the questions are. Two, it needs to be administered completely externally, I would suggest, because cops aren't going to answer the questions if they think that you're going to be reading their responses. And so the questions need to go out and be returned to someone external to the PD, who's then going to review and do what they do with the data and write that report. So I would specifically argue that the police department does not administer the survey and the results go back to it.
And I was just I have an echo. And also what Commissioner Powell said, the police should not be too involved in this. And also, I think by doing it electronically, they do is, you give them a deadline to get it done, and they can do it in the privacy of their own home, and they have time to think about it. So we just have to set a deadline that we would like it completed. But I think that would allow for more trust and not somebody watching over their shoulders.
Yeah, you want to make sure when something like this is done. I mean, we do this all the time in corporate America where I work, that the participants understand that it is anonymous as well. That's the only way you're going to get them to be honest about it. And they have to trust that it's actually anonymous at the same time.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, so does this capture the key commissioners, the chiefed out to finalize the survey question set and coordinate administration of it by August, and it should be administered by a third party? What else do we need to add to this to capture the additional needs mentioned?
So Josh, I'm going back to Dante's statements. I think it should be developed completely separate from the police department, with us having no input, so that, we don't have any part of it. And that way, we'll just provide the link, or they can provide the link through our email system, so that officers can go on there and take that. So when it says administered by a third party, maybe developed and administered by a third party.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It should be developed, administered, analyzed, and finally should be disseminated by the third party.
I agree with everything Commissioner Prospero just said.
Second that.
Great. And maybe I missed Chief out when he collaborate with, I guess he facilitated or be involved. So that's good clarification. Great.
And who is it shared with? I just think the commission is a pretty narrow. I mean, it'll go to more than that, I'm sure, but
I think it should be shared with all stakeholders in the public.
I propose the initial results are initially shared with the chief equity officer within the mayor's office, so they can make that initial directive of approaching any cultural bias if there is there. And I think within that framework as well, too, it gives the city an initiative to kind of take the responsibility on it a little more, because as we know, the police department is an executive portion of the mayor's office. So I think, Chief Brown and Mayor Mendenhall, in coordination with the chief equity officer, would be able to make any final decisions with those results with an outside party organization. If Chief Brown's asking for that, I agree with that. The same way we brought Matrix in is probably the same way officers would feel more respected and also transparent in their efforts. And Commissioner Shiflett, thank you for also piggybacking off of the point. Like, it doesn't even need to be an outside group necessarily, as much as the city or interns within the city could set up a Google poll. And that's not insanely difficult to do. So you can measure those results both statistically too. We can break down how many officers we have within the department. We can also break down within that framework too, is like which intent. I think the intent is the hardest thing within the initial polling of like, how can we express to officers that this is an initiative that is meant to lead to more progression and more understanding. I feel like a lot of officers right now out the get-go might kind of view it as like a more of a personalized statement. So my suggestion would be to actually just keep it. I want to hire an outside group, but I feel like that might detract and push, like Dante's saying, into December, and I don't know if we have that time. So I suggest maybe looking into a Google poll option with city staff.
So Commissioner Powell, just to follow up for clarification, you would define as here a third party being anybody but the Salt Lake City Police Department?
Yeah, I think the mayor's office should be able to handle that information, and they should want that information, and then they can decide what to do with it from there on out with the chief equity officer at that point, because we don't know if this commission will be here at that point, and that is one of my main concerns.
To Commissioner Powell's comments, I like that. Maybe the key commissioners can work with Deborah Alexander, who is the HR director internally, which may expedite the process a little bit quicker, and then you'd have somebody internally helping push this thing forward.
Perfect. I agree with that. Thank you, Chief. Can you repeat her last name for me, Deborah?
Deborah Alexander. I can provide contact information to Josh and Commission. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would also explicitly state that the data would be disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And then if you wanted to talk about gender, sexual orientation, whatever that might be, but specifically the data is disaggregated by race and ethnicity.
I worry of putting something like this on some other staff member's plate. Because just maybe this new person that comes in, or but this is not something that can just easily be done. I know people are saying that. I do these all the time, and they're not easily done. Especially if you want professional outcomes and recommendations. I worry about giving this to another staff member that has their plate full and something else they have to do. Because that may be put at the end of their priority list because they got to get their tasks done. So I worry about that. I understand that, bringing a third party in, but if you get, just, hey, you, this is what we're going to do, that may fall, again, at the end of their list, and the quality of the report may not be all that good.
What do you think of the chief equity officer position, Moises?
I don't know if they'll have the capacity to do something like this.
Okay.
Or the ability.
And their skills, their skill level may be, I don't know if they know statistics and
That's true.
That's my concern. And being in government where I often got thrown stuff at me, and it's like, okay, I got to figure out how to do this. I don't know how, but I'll wing it. The quality of work that came out of that for me was not very good. So that's my only concern about doing something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ask is to be able to provide funds for a third party to do this. I mean, that's part of the ask.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you on everything that Commissioner said. I have big concerns about this.
All right, so I hear several people and others agreeing with body language that the third party should be a party outside the PD and city staff and funded. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think we should also clarify that we should agree upon who that third party is, or have at least commissioners from this commission invited and approving who that entity is. I don't feel comfortable inviting a third party hired by an institution to observe its own implicit bias trainings. That it's not.
I agree.
All right, does that capture Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, are we closer to kind of a final ask on this? Any further thoughts, comments?
Let me, does that, do we need directions then if it's through a third party on how the results will be shared or who they'll be shared with? Do you want to specify that?
Should the results be shared with the chief equity officer, who would then also share the results with the council, the city council and the mayor?
And maybe the commissioners, if we're there still. Don't you think?
The major stakeholders, yeah.
Yeah.
Mayor's office, council, the commission, Judge Nicole Salazar Hall. Sorry, I'm spreading rumors.
Yes, sir. Certainly the
Why are you
department,
shaking your head?
public.
All of that kids know?
Yeah, and then the department and the public.
Yeah, Reverend Davis speaking. The department needs this information too, don't they?
All right, yes, the results shall be
CIT team.
with the whole world. How's that?
There we go. Definitely the new therapist or mental health care provider within the department as well. I don't know if individual statistics, like they won't be gathered anyways, so never mind.
All right, any other comments? Suggestions? Doubts? Dante, you mentioned something about the data and the report of that. I don't think I captured that.
I mean, I don't know that it needs to be in here specifically. I mean, if the commission and others are going to evaluate who, they can set the criteria by which the expectations are for the disaggregation of data, is my point.
Okay. We want a date on this deadline. We were talking August. Do we want to put that on there as a recommendation timeline?
I don't know if we want to necessarily make it a mandated thing to be done by a certain date. Maybe have like selections for the commission to approve by August 1st, if that's plausible. But I feel like we should ask the city when they think that could be done. If we could also set up maybe a meeting with the policies and practices subcommittee for next week, maybe we could get that done.
All right, so we're move this forward as is, and we can discuss timeline perhaps at our next meeting, Commissioner Powell. All right.
Okay. Any other suggestions or edits to the language?
Just curious about the city's policies. Bring in a third party, if this would have to be an RFP, which slow us down. So you may want to be thoughtful about the dollar amount in terms of the time frame, and just a brief critique, Josh, just the way it's written, where the survey shall be funded, etc. think we mean that the city shall fund it, and then the third party will develop, administer, analyze, and disseminate. The way it's written now, third party will also fund it. Just
Good, thank you.
correct that before you.
And a question to city staff, is there a dollar amount under which you can do a sole source? And what would that limit be?
Dante, this is Coletta. Unfortunately, I am unaware, but I can find out for you all.
Okay.
And maybe we can incorporate that into our timeframe discussion back in the subcommittee, but I think it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, good point.
Dante, I just got a notification from another staff member. It is $40,000.
Okay, so 39.9, you can do a sole source. Okay.
Commissioner McDonald, 39,999.
Sounds good.
That pricing sound good to everyone? That kind of makes me bite my tongue a little bit, makes me question my Google poll surveys, you know?
All right, we're good to move forward, Dante.
Asking the commissioners, do we have consensus that this is ready to move forward? Anyone opposed to moving this forward? Okay, all in favor of moving forward?
Aye.
All right, I think you're good to go with number 3, Josh.
And can I just reiterate, Josh said it up front, but Commissioner Shiflett really pushed for this, and I know she had to leave to go to another call, but I just want to acknowledge her specific effort to get it to this recommendation.
Absolutely, absolutely, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Andrew and Commissioner Prospero also for looking at researching and asking good questions. All right. I will, yeah. Did somebody say my name?
Yes, sir. Take it to number next one.
All right. So this has been discussed in full commission and the training subcommittee and the policies practices subcommittee. And there have been several emails. I know Chief Brown's also had discussions with several commission members. Community-based training on history of policing. So the city and others had asked for some specifics, and Dante drafted this. And so Dante, why don't you read this so it comes across in your voice, and then we can have discussions about it. Is that okay?
Sure. Thank you. The original kind of ask was about training on the history of Salt Lake City and its communities of color, and I said that's not enough. There needs to be a much bigger understanding of the history of communities of color in the United States and its relationship with people of color and those impacts. And it should be co-facilitated, co-trained by a community member, knowledgeable and involved in equity work, as well as an officer, sergeant, lieutenant, or above, because, I mean, cops want to be able to say they are listening to another officer doing this work. As many times as I've seen it and done it, it's really helpful to co-lead it. It should be also not just a one and done in the academy, but ongoing work in the in-service trainings that are happening as well. And obviously the content would evolve after everyone has gone through the first session in the academy. Utah Highway Patrol has a model that they use to train all of their officers on all shifts. And it took them, I forget what they said, almost 9 months to go through that training. But it was well received. The history is a mix of history and present day examples of legal and social impacts. Understanding and with examples, institutional racism and bias, what that looks like, how it impacts, and what those outcomes are currently as well as historically. And also a place and a space for officers and to speak candidly, similar to the dialogues, but there would be no commissioners there. They would be all either recruits or officers during in-service, but to speak candidly and share their experiences and their thoughts and have that opportunity for engagement, because otherwise it's just going to be, it's just going to feel like a hammer And so how do we ensure that it's not done with any blame, shame, guilt in this presentation, but the opportunity for just understanding and professional development so they can do what they do in a better way to better serve the community. And then I think that was pretty much the gist of it.
Yes, excellent. So I'll open that up because I know there have been some other discussions and Chief Brown has met with others. And I know from our last call, you had some specifics on, your vision for it and doing it 20 different times. So I'll open it up to the commission and others.
And also, it's not just, everybody wants to talk about implicit bias, but it has to be about institutional and systemic bias, not just one's personal bias, because nobody's going to say they are anything except great. But what is the
I second that.
Does the institution look like and how is it biased? Thanks.
The question that I wanted to ask is this a part of regular, ordinary training, or is this an additional item of training that would be required?
Commissioner Davis, if I could speak for just a minute, I felt very strongly that I wanted to get with the commissioners, and the reason I felt that is this training is very important to us. We can't miss with this, and I wanted your feedback and your input as we develop this. And Dante, I appreciated your comments that you put in that email. I took those to heart. I think Josh, you provided some comments too. But the way I look at this, Commissioner Davis, is this is part of our new hire training, our lateral hiring training. And then just like Dante says, this becomes part of our in-service training yearly, and where we talk about it, because it can't be one and done. This is a conversation that needs to keep going. So I reached out to Commissioner Prosperos and Commissioner Angela Warden and Commissioner Hawkins, and we sat down and talked about it. And commissioners, maybe you want to weigh in as to some of the suggestions you had and where we went with it. But I think we really dialed into a good place. And I think it's something that when we talk about it, it may be something that might be good for the entire city. I'm not saying we're going to dilute it down and not have those conversations about policing, because that's where it started. But I think we talked about maybe getting HR, Deb Alexander and her team, to help us develop this and help us facilitate this. But we really need community members, just like Dante's talking about, to have those hard conversations. We can't have those conversations with ourselves. We need to have the reality of having somebody in that room talking with us back and forth and sharing, ideas and concerns, just having that conversation. So Commissioner Prosperos or Commissioner Andrew Warden, do you want to weigh in on a little bit of our discussion?
I'll let Steve talk since he hasn't been able to speak much today.
Dr. Prospero, thank you for yielding. Let me say a few things. Ongoing, evolving as we learn about it. You said, Chief, including the laterals and the academy folks, set that foundation immediately upon coming into the department. This is the way we do things in Salt Lake City. These are the expectations. And I think that really goes to the cultural change that we're looking for as a mission, to set that foundation as soon as they come in. And I agree with Dante, you can't end it, right? It has to be part of ongoing in-service training. And it's already been said, but it can't be one and done. It has to continue to move. And police officers are conditioned through training to find the takeaways to how does this connect to my job. And I recommend that we ensure there's an element that the closer you can be to the community, the more effectively you can police a community, and that's how it impacts your job, right? So I think we have to find that connection to help them be successful getting the information. And then finally, we discussed having that community person vetted with the training unit, put an equity lens on all the training that is going on, so that we don't have this nice little subset, and that's our cultural awareness or our cultural competency lens. It should be involved in all the different training, and it should have a set of eyes from the community on it as well. Police understand their tactics really well, but sometimes what gets lost in that is how to serve the community, right? When we're looking at those tactics. So that should be a part of it too. So that's my recollection of what we discussed. Moises or Tanya, do you have other pieces that you recall?
No, I think you covered it well.
So the question to you then and others is do you feel that intent is captured here, Commissioner Andrew Weirden? Is there additional language we want to include to specify in the recommendation?
I think, Josh, that we need to somehow put in the recommendation that it be done early in the process, in the hiring time frame. And I don't know what that means, but I think somehow we need to do this the first month or the first year or whatever, but it needs to be done early.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Davis. Chief Brown, how can we incorporate that in? What would that language look like in terms of your processes and onboarding of new officers?
Josh, I'm just trying to think. I envision it being part of one of the first classes that we have with them. We bring them in to our academy, and HR comes in and talks about different things. We talk about the admin comes in and talk, but I think it should be just like Commissioner Davis is talking. It should be within the first 30 days. I hate to put a time limit on it, but it should be in their academy before they ever go to FTO or reach the streets. I'm trying to envision how we say that.
The way that you just said it.
Say it again.
And I don't want to take too much time on what I'm about to say, but this particular issue speaks so closely to my heart that I hold it very dear and close to my heart. I think it is so very, very, very important. We've all heard the quote, those who fail to learn from the history are doomed to repeat it. And this is one of those things. So like what you just said, if it's part of the onboarding process, we want people who really want to serve the community that they are charged with to be in law enforcement. That's part of the way that we can rectify or at least get on the right track of where we're going in that whole reimagining policing and what it looks like for communities of color. So this speaks very, very close to my heart. So I just wanted to just say that.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonald. Does the language capture your desires and your intent and hope for this training? Or is there something specific you'd like included additionally?
No, I think everything that has been said thus far hits the nail. I always say that quote wrong, but nails it. Okay, I'll just leave it like that. The input that has been provided thus far is spot on.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonald. Others?
I think we have a University of Utah right here, and I think we have well-qualified educators that should be at this table in terms of developing curriculum. So I think we should also reach out to the people, like again, surveys. Students know how to do surveys. Racial history. Pastor Davis was a professor at the University of Utah. So I'm not really hearing any input though about bringing those people who are community members and qualified community members into the conversation, and that's kind of irking me, solely because we're not going to be able to change the perspective of law enforcement individuals with, I think, other law enforcement individuals teaching them that history. So again, I think we need commissioners, but I don't have a doctorate, you know, in African-American studies, but I think we should have someone that does there. And I think that we don't need to necessarily keep throwing funds at the situation, because I think that's detracting from the intent of what we're trying to establish in the first place.
Thanks.
Commissioner, so then how would you rephrase what's already here, that it should be co-facilitated with a community member of color, knowledgeable and involved in equity work? You're muted if you're speaking.
Yeah, we can't hear you, NJ.
We can't hear you. I
would suggest that someone who has a PhD and has experience teaching, that way we can ensure that I'm sure these people already have a developed curriculum established, and I think they can operate with the police department in the best ways that they can disseminate it and use it. But I don't think, like, again, just like one of my main concerns is I think we need a survey, and this is a different proposal, but I wasn't anticipating we were going to be spending up into the multiple thousands of dollars for a simple survey that college students such as myself can do. So my intent with this is to make sure that we have commissioners such as myself or other individuals in the community such as Pastor Davis reach out to their other networks to see who would be willing to volunteer to come and do this on their own time.
That's a big ask. And I would also push back on a PhD, because there's a big difference between teaching and facilitating a conversation. And PhDs tend to teach, not facilitate. And
yeah,
so
I think with the curriculum, though, I thought we were hoping to teach, because there will be a sense of white fragility in that room to the response of that. And that's natural even in my spaces as a university student here. So as much as we need someone to facilitate the space, we need an educator who is not necessarily concerned with the feelings of the demographics they're teaching, because those people are there for a job. My professors don't necessarily care about my feelings when they're teaching me these subjects in rooms. They're not facilitating them, they're educating me. So I think officers should be educated as well and not facilitated when it comes to the curriculum. That's my perspective there.
No, I appreciate that. I think we're having a difference of semantics. I'm not suggesting that they're not being taught something they don't know. I'm just suggesting a PhD, narrowing in the field to a PhD narrows the field. And I don't think that's what you want to do.
Yeah, that's kind of, that's my concern, MJ. And I absolutely agree with you, Commissioner Powell, that there does need to be someone who's absolutely qualified, but the qualification doesn't necessarily have to be a PhD. And really, I do take issue with not worrying about feelings. And trust me, I'm a lawyer. I don't deal in feelings. I am in an emotionally charged field of work, but I don't deal in feelings. I'm not a feelings kind of person. But what we are going to be dealing with is we are going to be having to confront that white fragility, and that is very difficult. You are a willing student. You're wanting to learn this. We're going to have some officers who do not want to learn this. And
should they be officers, though, if they don't want to understand the impact of that? Because
I get that. Oh, I agree.
Argue that's why I was protesting last year.
I totally agree with that. But are they going to say that? They're not going to say that. They're just going to listen, act like they're taking it in, and then nothing's going to happen. So what we want to do is we want to have some change, right? We want to get to those officers who feel like they don't have a problem, who are afraid to confront that white fragility. It's not easy. It's hard. It's hard to confront my own privilege and fragility in this conversation. And I'm a willing participant and ready to recognize that I have shortcomings. But if you have someone who is very rigid in their view and their worldview, that maybe they don't have a problem, this is somebody else's problem, how do we get to them to show them that they do need to change? And it's not because they're a bad person. It's just how they were raised, and let's make a change for the better. That's my only concern with having just a PhD who's not worried about feelings. We need to have someone who's able to get to people like that, because I'm not worried about the ones who are already there and willing to say, okay, I want to do this work. There are absolutely officers on the SLCPD who are there, and that is absolutely fantastic. Let's get to the rest of them, the ones who aren't quite there yet or having trouble getting there. If we talk at them, they're not going to get anywhere. Might go the opposite.
I agree. Thank you for giving me that perspective, Commissioner Salazar. I think that was more introspective in terms of helping identify the intent of the curriculum established, because I know there are officers that probably don't have the same perspective when it comes to that. I think this just goes back to even our private conversations of the mutual misunderstandings we identified there, and how can we excuse sorry, commissioners, I apologize, my roommate. That was extremely unprofessional. So I think it's communicating the intent, and I'll go ahead and end there. I apologize.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell and Commissioner Salazar Hall. I was just going to comment, we have had discussions with Utah Highway Patrol, who did a similar training, and it is a process, and they have had great results, even from officers that initially didn't think they needed it or wanted it or thought they should have it. So I added qualified there, not too broad, but a qualifier. And so I'll ask if there are any other comments or additions or questions.
I have a question, and hopefully it's not too vague, but you said they had great results. How are the results measured?
That is a great question. I'm looking at some notes here. I think the results were anecdotal from those we talked to. So, officers coming to the trainers and telling them that, the second time around, how it changed, how they approached a vehicle, or how they thought about things, or policed. So I don't know that they're tracking it, Commissioner McDonald, like there's data on that, but more anecdotal. That'd be a good question to ask.
Josh and commissioners, would you mind if I gave myself an assignment to contact Commissioner Anderson, who's over UHP, and just visit with him about the training, and then ask if we can maybe get a lesson plan as to what was taught that we could review and maybe with some of the key commissioners, and then move on from there or help develop what we're going to do?
Yeah, Chief, we talked with Lieutenant Alex Lepley. And so, yeah, that'd be great.
Did they give you a lesson plan, Josh? Did they share what they taught?
Commissioner Shiflett connected us and shared. I'll share with you what she gave me, and she knows the instructors and who they are. And this was like 3 months ago.
Yeah,
I'll share with you what I have.
So sounds like we have a document to work with. I'll also say this: we have lost our quorum, so cannot take any official action from this point forward. So I would suggest if we craft this language in the best way that we can, next time we return together, it can be an easy yes or no. So we've already got two, but now the last two, we can't move forward on an official.
Yeah, no worries. We selfishly hog the whole meeting, and so we can share the other recommendations and continue to refine them in our subcommittee meeting next week.
That'd be great.
They're related to co-response, mental health, and then call diversion dispatch. So look, that's just a teaser.
Okay. Okay. So if you could send that out to everyone, they could have a chance to review, digest, and come prepared to offer any thoughts, suggestions, and maybe move pretty quickly on getting the last two all done. But in the interim, the first two recommendations you provided have been approved by the commission and can be moved forward to the mayor and city council.
Thank you, Commission. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving, I know the next presentation, the presenter has to leave shortly. So it's about the resolution that we had addressed before that was going to city council and mayor. And it's on the agenda, it's entitled White Coats for Black Lives Matter, and just need to state that there's a clarification in terms of that title because the group never completed and coordinated with elected officials and requested the city consider the resolution. And those that did don't have an official title. The title, I'm not sure where it came from, but that's not their official title. And so Kevin Nguyen, who's a member of the group, is here to share the group and what the group is, but also thoughts on the resolution that is before you this evening. So, Mr. Nguyen.
Awesome. Thank you, Dante. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the space and time to come and share this really important resolution that our team and a few members of the Salt Lake City team have been working on. So my name is Kevin Nguyen. I am a community person. I get to also work in the public health sector, currently working at the Utah Department of Health and various other community organizations to really drive and address the health disparities and inequities that we're seeing in our communities. And this group that helped put together this resolution was originally formed by a big community advocate. Her name was Margarita Sattini. Actually, this is her poster. And you know, with COVID, she organized the first meeting and wasn't able to make to the second meeting. And a few of us got together recently to try to start up this effort again in her honor to be able to do what she wanted to do. And that was create a community-oriented approach in addressing racism as a public health and moral crisis. And this is such an important thing to address, especially during COVID. We know that there's really a growing body of research that has shown that centuries of racism within this country, within our state, even within our cities and counties, has led to really a profound and negative impact on our communities, specifically our communities of color. And this impact is so pervasive and embedded in our societies and changes and impacts the way people live, the way they learn, the way they grow, preach, worship, and plays a big driver in what we call the social determinants of health, right? The social drivers of disease. And this is why we're seeing, even within Salt Lake City, life expectancy differences of up to 9 to 10 years between different cities. If you're looking at Rose Park, Glendale, you're living 75, 76 years on average. And if you live in the Salt Lake City avenues, you're living closer to 87 years. Why is that? And this is just, we can spend the whole time talking about why is there that life expectancy gap. But really, this is where this group has come together to be able to build out this resolution that helps us recognize and highlights racism as a big driver in why we see these health inequities. So within this resolution, we put together statements from a national perspective, recognizing racism as a determinant of health, looking at what drivers of racism that impacts health, the many key factors, highlighting some Utah, Salt Lake City facts from the Utah Department of Health showing racial and ethnic health disparities because of racism. And then lastly, just highlighting what we hope the city and the council and everyone who's involved with this work is going to be able to do to try to address this as an overall group. And really our hope is to be able to not only get the support of all of you on this commission in being able to declare this resolution, but also have the city council and the mayor be able to declare this so that we can begin this really, really crucial work in breaking down the structures and the policies and the programs that were built on racism, and be able to then equitably provide for our communities throughout the city of Salt Lake. And I don't know if you all have any questions or comments on that.
Well, first of all, Margarita was my girl. She was my heart. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, that you are continuing her work, and I just want to say thank you. She was definitely about eliminating racism within the community. She worked hard. She gave her life for it. So I appreciate you 100%.
Thank you, Darlene. And this effort, most of my team is not here today. I don't know if anyone on my team is here today, but this was a very team-oriented approach, and I get the honor of being able to speak for my team today. And I'll make sure I express your thanks to them.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. I would suggest one, since we can't make an official decision, I apologize, Mr. Nguyen, that we can't give you that this evening. And I would also suggest, commissioners, that however, this isn't the final language, or is it at this point, Mr. Nguyen? Or you're also asking for some thoughts on it?
Yeah, I believe the revisions that have been made on there are the final one for you all. I don't know if you all have any feedback on it.
Thank you. And hopefully you had a chance to look at it, commissioners. If not, it gives all the whereases, et cetera, but specifically calls out racism as a public health crisis and a particular public health issue in the city of Salt Lake, and then provides the resolves of what will be done, which is work with mental health, community, county health partners to address institutional racism, find data, disaggregate the data, et cetera. So it gives some very specifics of what to do. And so I would suggest, if all of those things resonate with you, maybe the specifics of the wording, not to wordsmith, but to address the intent and the power of the resolution itself. And that we could make, if it's not too late, a formal decision for you in a few weeks. I'm not sure when you were trying to move this forward, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, our goal is to really make sure that number one is the language and the structure and what we want to express to the council and the mayor, but most importantly, our communities are strong, are sure, and are actionable. So if that takes a few weeks, then please give your expertise and your thoughts on that. And we'd love to be able to have everyone come together to build this as one.
Thank you. Commissioners, thoughts? Okay. I will just...
Oh, sorry. Thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So I would suggest that all the commissioners can take maybe a final look on the document that they have with them and come prepared to give you a full commission yes vote at our next meeting.
Thank you so much, Dante, and thank you, commissioners and everyone who was part of this group. Really appreciate you spending time to review that, to provide your input, and to be part of this process. It's a great honor to be here. And please reach out if anyone has any questions or possibly wants to be part of this group as we continue our work addressing racism and health inequities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Truly, thank you for the work you're doing and moving this forward. Okay, I want to, Matt, I don't want to not do a debrief on the dialogues that were held, because if we don't do it tonight, it's going to be over a month before we can actually do it. And I really hesitate to do that. And that said, the officers aren't really on the call. Officer Norgard is here as the only, I think, officer who was able to attend those. But that said, I think it's still important for the commissioners to speak and offer their thoughts and perspectives on what they heard and how they were engaged with and how they engaged. But I will leave that up to you as well. I don't know if you don't want to do it if the officers are not also here. So I'll turn it over to Larry to see what the thoughts on the commissioners are and move forward with the debrief of the dialogue.
Dante, if I could, I think I was just going to share a couple of my own thoughts before getting into the discussion, if that's okay with you.
Go ahead. Yes.
I just want to publicly commend all of the participants in those small group dialogues for the level of vulnerability, candor, and courage that I saw across all 4 of the sessions that I was privileged to facilitate. I think that the commissioners spoke in great detail. I was going to say excruciating detail in certain cases about experiences that they had had with police, whether in or outside of Salt Lake City, in ways that I know were painful to relive, re-traumatizing. A number of the officers also spoke about their own encounters with other police when they may have been questioned or stopped as a civilian. But then they further shared their experiences as officers and the power and the significance of their service to them. I felt at the conclusion of all 4 dialogues that while I can't know for sure who understands whom and to what degree, I think some very important truths were surfaced and shared. I think that the commissioners were able to articulate to the officers that they have had experiences with police that have been difficult. The officers were able to share with the commissioners that they have worked hard to serve their communities as best they can. And I tried, hopefully with some success, to, demonstrate to you all that both things are true. Officers can feel a great deal of conviction in the quality of their service and the strength of their systems, and commissioners can feel deeply upset by the way that they and members of their families and or communities have been treated in the past, whether by this police department or others. So all of that is very difficult to hear, and some of it is very difficult to say. And it is, again, for those reasons that I think that everybody who participated is worthy of high praise. But I'm here just to create some space for what I call brave space, or what I heard someone else call brave space, for anyone to share any reflections they've had since those sessions were held. Reverend Davis?
Thank you. I was particularly impressed with the lessons that I learned from people like Officer Scott, as well as Commissioner Suarez and others. And I think that the more we have those kind of conversations, the more healthy the department will be in terms of doing its work. So I appreciate what we've learned, and would hope that we continue to have those kind of discussions. And maybe even if when the commission is no longer here, have those kind of lessons. They were hard to hear in many cases, but I learned some things myself. But one of the things that I learned is that many of the experiences of others are different, but very similar in terms of nature to those that others on the commission have had. So I appreciate the mayor, the city council, and the chief appointing this group and giving us this assignment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Darlene, Commissioner McDonald.
I'm going to start this off with a disclaimer. I am feeling a bit emotional at the moment. seeing the picture of my dear friend Margarita, who we lost, has really touched me. So the conversations that we had with the officers were helpful, useful, hard. And I do wish that we had more on this call tonight. I think that it is imperative that we continue the dialogue with them, because some of the things that was said in our small group has stayed with me, and I feel should be addressed with a couple of the officers. Even, I mean, I attended a round table basically last night with a congressman, and there were some officers there. I don't think they were part of Salt Lake City office police department, but some of the things that was said really hit me, that it seems to be a us against them mentality when it's not. It really is an understanding of where we are, and those conversations are not being had. And there are lots of officers who feel threatened. Their job, this is their job, their livelihood, how they're going to support their families. And you have these people, and primarily Black people or people of color, who is coming out for them, coming to them. When that is not what's happening at all. So my takeaway from the small group discussions, especially when it comes to the discussion around compliance and complying, I believe needs to go further, and we need to discuss that further with the officers, because we dropped it. And so if I understand there's going to be further into the future, and people don't want to keep rehashing the past, but I think the conversation should be had. It probably won't be had on this call because we don't have many of them here with us today. But we need to have this conversation because there's just too much that is being missed. And we're talking past each other. And if we're talking past each other and not talking to each other, then we're never going to get to where we need to be to make things better. So if we can just schedule it again, I don't care, but it needs to happen.
Wise words, Commissioner McDonald.
I concur with Commissioner McDonald. There was, in some of the conversations, a distinct feeling that compliance was the only issue, putting the onus of not being injured, shot, killed was on the person interacting with law enforcement. It was a distinct minimization of the history of racism in policing and some of the commissioner's direct experiences with law enforcement. That was difficult. That was quite difficult. And so people know, I really haven't had any negative interactions with law enforcement. I had the opposite. My cousin was in charge of the security at Matheson Courthouse for quite some time. So I actually got special treatment as Sergeant Suarez's little cousin. But it was still hurtful to hear and to see some of my fellow commissioners have their experiences minimized by if only you comply. If only you comply, then you'll be okay. When we know that's not entirely accurate. And if that's something we're getting in a small group conversation, I'm concerned that that's only the tip of the iceberg of what's there. I know there's already a bit of a community view of why are we looking at equity. This is a problem with defendants. This isn't a problem with our police. And I am concerned over how many law enforcement feel the same way. I don't know for certain, but the training that we discussed that we weren't able to pass tonight as a recommendation is something that I do believe, after being involved in those conversations, needs to be a priority and must happen very quickly. I'm not going to name those officers' names. I think they were very, very brave to join in these conversations and to have these conversations with them. And I agree with Commissioner McDonald. This is not an us versus them. I don't want anyone to get fired. I just want law enforcement to safely protect and serve everybody in the community and have the community feel safe to call law enforcement.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Salazar Hall. I just want to, I guess, remind everyone that we made the decision to conduct the sessions in private to allow for as much candor and transparency as we could. And I want to encourage folks to share their own personal takeaways while at the same time just remembering that folks join the sessions as private conversations in a way. So I know that it's a tricky balance to strike, but just want to encourage that.
I wanted to piggyback off of Darlene in terms of being an emotional day. I don't know if anyone knows what today is aside from this, which I don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo, but today is our Missing Murdered Indigenous Awareness Day here, but it's also being an awareness across the nation. That's why I'm wearing red. My discussion, it was very difficult. Afterwards, I had to just shut down and just rethink and recollect myself, because what I'm saying, it's difficult to muster up and come out in the open and talk about my forms of trauma, my forms of what I feel when engaging an officer or just seeing a police officer, but also what my community has expressed. And right now it's just me as a Native woman in this conversation. Well, in that conversation we had. And when we always talk about in our Native communities about our ancestors that are behind us. And I feel that with my ancestors because we have historical traumas, which are still relevant to this day. Here in the state of Utah, we're on the top 10 list of missing murdered Indigenous women. But yet, when I talk about these issues and I talk and discuss with different agencies or just someone is wanting to know about Native communities and issues, they don't even know about these things. Even boarding school issues, law enforcement, so many things, and it's not in our history. That's the one thing, that's the reason why it's not in history. And so one of the police officers couldn't understand that or fathom that. And I do my best as much as possible to be very supportive and look from the other lens as well, because I do want, if anything, I really do want us to work together. We talk about restorative practices. Our ancestors, native ancestors, that's how we handled everything. We sit in, whether it was a teepee, a hogan, wikia, pueblo, everyone sat in a circle and they listened and figured out a plan. They planned it, they heard everyone, and then from there they planned. And so that's where I come from when I'm trying to understand law enforcement. But I would also like to be respected in that way with what I'm trying to say in an authentic, genuine manner, which sometimes I'm terrified to, but I'm going to continue to do that. And so And so I just wanted to express that. As I mentioned, today's been a very difficult day today, all day today. I've been hearing stories of our Native women. You know, our murder rate of Native women is 10 times the national average on some reservations in urban communities. So I've been hearing a number of stories, and somewhere, you know, they talk about there's no law enforcement that have been supportive. So, and then hearing of my dear friend as well is who Darlene's talking about. That's emotional too. So I just wanted to, I'm going to continue, you know, and work with law enforcement. I'm still waiting. I don't have a number to contact the officer I'm signed up with. I'm still waiting to get that settled or to get in contact with that, because I definitely would like to meet up with the officer I'm assigned with. So thank you.
And that takes courage, and we appreciate it, Commissioner Smith.
I know that we've lost our one officer who was in any of those dialogues. I guess I would, if I might, Larry, ask if chief or assistant chief, if either of you have heard anything about the dialogues from any of the officers who were there.
Dante, commissioners, I haven't heard the conversations. Again, they were, as Larry talked, they were private, and I haven't heard any of the outcomes or any of these stories. So that's why I've been very appreciative of the commissioners who have shared some of these things this evening. So thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Dante, I think I'll hand it back to you for now, but have heard the input from Commissioner McDonald and others that the conversation should continue, and know that we'll explore the best ways for that to happen. And thanks all for sharing so much.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing the difficulty of your day and the difficulty of this conversation for your communities and for yourself. We know it's not easy, and we certainly appreciate your being willing to be vulnerable in order to try to make things better. So we truly appreciate that. I know we're about 30 minutes past time. I think we've hit most of the agenda items. I would suggest, certainly for training, we're continuing to do our work and what we're doing. I don't have anything in particular to report. Siobhan, I'd just ask you if there's anything in particular that the committees would like, or your committee would need to report.
No, I don't think that there is any. I'll invite my commission members to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we are all set with anything we need to bring to the full commission at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Youth Subcommittee, anything to report? I'm not sure we still have MJ or Rogelio. Okay. As I said, we have lost the quorum, so can't make any official decisions. But I hate to end on a heavy note. But I, as you can see, and I hope the chief can see, the power of the stories of the commissioners who spoke today, and the need to continue those conversations, not just from their perspective, but I would also argue from your officer's perspective, and the need to continue these conversations, to share perspectives and come to a greater understanding of certainly community perspectives, because I'll offer my not so humble opinion that many of the things that the commissioners shared weren't really heard by the officers. And that's just more traumatizing and difficult as they step into some of those conversations. I think as Commissioner Salazar Hall was describing, Commissioner Smith and others describing the stories that are very real to them on a daily basis aren't necessarily heard or that perspective understood as the officers do what they do. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It just, I'm suggesting that some of those perspectives aren't heard because they're not understood. And maybe they don't understand where they come from. And we haven't had enough time to have those deeper conversations. And that's, I think, what we all would like to see happen so that we can all get to a better place. So, happy Wednesday. And as always, thank you for your time, your energy, because this is draining work. You have to give your energy, and it's not always easy to do. So I certainly thank you for letting me take your energy and hopefully try to do something good with it, and you do this work and shape your energy into positive outcomes for the city of Salt Lake and the communities that you represent. So I truly thank you for all that you do. Any final thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, weddings, divorces, babies, anything going on? Commissioner Nguyen, I'll give you the last word.
Kidding, right? I thought we were going to get off the call.
You can do
Look,
that.
I spoke a lot during those meetings. I didn't want to get in the way of what people had to say today because it is so powerful, and I would like to let it wash over me. Officers go out and work hard to serve our community, and they put their lives on the line, and then they don't understand why people are mad at them. And we've got to get to that. So I've asked commissioners to share their stories so that the officers can hear them, because if they don't, then we can never change that mindset, right? So it's true that the officers work hard. It's also true that we need to do better. And the nuance of that in the training that we're trying to craft, Chief, you said it, we got to get it right. And if we can, and we talk to each other and understand each other, and then law enforcement can serve the whole community, which makes all of us safer, and they're more effective at their jobs. And quite frankly, policing is easier when they do that. So thanks for the invitation. I didn't want to talk over anybody else. Vina, as always, so moving. I knew a different May 5th because of your Facebook post. Thank you for how. Yeah, as a privileged white man who worked in law enforcement, I try to learn all the time and do better. And I ask all of my colleagues in law enforcement to do the same, because community message is real and it's important. And as we work on this commission, let's get to that healthy dialogue where we understand each other. That defensiveness goes down for the education. Thanks for the last word, Dante, and I'll explain next meeting why I don't talk too much, but I'll let that go for this meeting.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, and thank you, commissioners. Feliz Cinco de Mayo, and please remember missing and murdered Indigenous women around this country and the impact it is having and the lack of awareness that it does have. So thank you, Commissioner Spitz.
All over the world, not just in this country.
No question. Thank you. All right, so have a great rest of your evening, everyone, and we will